and gentlemen, you are listening to Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. It's an engaging and enlightening talk show on life, relationships, and the business of life. Grab a cup of juice and just chill. Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. Live life, live fully.
Chris McCann on the show, who is a conscious leader and who works with leaders in the community. Now, welcome with me on the show today, Chris McCann.
Thank you for having me, Omobola. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure having you on the show today. Now, Chris, we'll be talking about leadership, about spirituality, and on being a man. Now, this sounds more interesting to me, and I know we can have a really worthwhile time having this show together. So, Chris, I'd like us to talk about aligning one's life with their purpose. So, at what breaking point should a person get to begin to consider this shift?
In my personal experience, it was when I had done everything that I thought I was supposed to do. And, the kids were, my sons had, gotten to and through college, was making enough money, married. And yet, after having accomplished all the things that I thought I was supposed to do, I still felt this vacuum. Right. There was something else that wasn't being addressed, no matter what kind of car I drove, what sort of clothes I wear, what sort of watches I would have on my wrist, all of the trappings, if you will, from a material perspective. And yet I wasn't happy. I didn't feel fulfilled. There was, something that was calling me, which I wasn't able to identify. And that gap, that delta, is what I began to solve for. And that's the work that I do with other people and with organizations, where you're doing all the right things, and yet we feel like we can actually be more and be more whole. And it was only through radical self-inquiry and a de-identification of the personas, the material aspects of this existence, of this life, and beginning to remove those and open them up for investigation, or, I like to say everything was open for subversion, including my belief systems. And growing up Catholic here in the States, there was just more out there, and I knew that intuitively, and that's where I began that exploration.
Awesome. Now, Chris, in one of your peer lines, you once said that external achievement is not enough. So the question is, so what are some of the things that we need to start considering in this regard?
And I'll use a really specific example. I thought that if I had, a certain set of clothing, from a store that's here in Los Angeles, that I would be complete. And yet I would go buy something and I'd bring it home, and it would sit in the closet for days, week, months, even a year. And it was so over the top that I found that I actually had 2 or 3 versions of the exact same shirt or the exact same pair of pants. I wasn't even aware that I had those things. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why am I acquiring what I'm acquiring? And that's, I noticed that on my own, which was good. And it's like, well, if I have these things, am I any happier now after having purchased these items? Or is it a symptom of, some sort of an illness or some aspect of me that's striving, that's trying to grab onto something? Professionally, it's like, okay, I make a certain amount of money and I'm working hard. Yet, even after I get a certain job title, right, does that change my state? Does that change how I feel about myself? And the answer is no. There was always something else to go do or something else to go have. And only through radical self-inquiry did I begin to evaluate the relationships that I had with these items or patterns or belief systems. And what's interesting is there's, as I sit here as Chris, the striving, the external validation that was needed. And the more time I've spent exploring, and I realize, and I've had experiences where I understand that it's generational. And when I look at my own propensity to like become very myopic and dive into something full speed and very deeply, almost obsessively, where does that come from? It comes from my parents, who may or may not have been aware of certain belief systems or patterns. And it comes from their parents. And, and certainly from a male perspective, from both of my grandfathers, and then even exploring that beyond. And how many generations of this trauma or these ways of operating are passed down to us in our genetic code. Not even the spiritual aspect of that, but just from a biological perspective, the memories that are implanted and imprinted on us. And then coming to an understanding, Omobola, of like, well, wait a minute. Just because it's how it's been doesn't mean that that's how it has to be going forward. And the greatest gift that we can give ourselves is ourselves. And how do we actually begin to do that? And so one, to use the metaphor, we're securing our own oxygen mask before we're attempting to assist others. And once that feels stable and secure, then we can make ourselves open to being available to our family. It's kids, grandparents, parents, our friends, our neighbors, our community, our employees, our employer, simply by how we operate in this world, and without being fascinated with the concept of trying to fix everyone. And it's as simple as, in my experience, of making ourselves available to someone and asking them how they are, and giving folks space to be seen, even if that makes them uncomfortable. But in turn, and I believe in the connectedness of everything and everyone. But if I'm giving someone an opportunity to be seen, then I also am being open and vulnerable to being seen through all the pretenses, all the personas, all of the words, all of the material trappings, and just being able to connect human to human and be available in that way, and just be interested in it, and as opposed to fascinated or fixated. We're fortunate enough to live very, very close to the beach. And, I was traveling earlier this week, came home. When I have time, I love to go down to the beach and walk, usually first thing in the morning. So I grabbed my coffee and I'm walking along the ocean. And what I love is like and just watching people. They're working out, they're doing yoga, they're meditating, they're swimming, surfing. It's people in the morning, connecting in some way. And you never know who you're going to meet on these walks. But as I made the turn and I was heading back toward my house, and I see this woman, must have been 75 to 80 years old, incredible posture. And she's very fit. And I see her watching me as we're approaching each other. And we both just started smiling. And as we're smiling, we just went in for a hug. We didn't say anything other than good morning. And we just hugged. And it was beautiful. And, to your point earlier, and just when you see someone and you connect in that way, words are the least effective form of communication. And to encounter someone who was just open to sharing space with me, even for 3 or 4 seconds, no matter what's going on in the world, no matter where we sit, that gives me hope is maybe not the right word, but it makes me feel like, yes, Chris, everything is okay and people still want to connect. And so I'm open to those things. And I didn't feel like I had to have an agenda or like, oh, by the way, let's just sit and meditate. It was just two people connecting in a very beautiful way.
Awesome. Good to know, Chris. Thank you for that inspiration. Now, your insights were tending towards spirituality. I know that you're very spiritual, right? So I want us to talk about leadership and spirituality. Now, leader spirituality affects their vision and behavior, right? I would like you to buttress more on this point.
I went through a pretty intense 360 review with my CEO, my chief revenue officer, peers, and employees. And I don't hide like these other aspects of myself. And one of the paragraphs that came back from someone who was a peer was, I'm interested in seeing how Chris balances his spirituality with his responsibilities here. And yet every time Chris disappears and comes back down from the mountain, he's always a little bit more effective than he was before he, went off for a week. And it's really easy as a sales leader to stare at a spreadsheet and look at someone's pipeline and do the math. But if I don't feel as if I'm making myself available to help people accomplish what is important to them, and it doesn't matter to me if someone wants to take flying lessons with their father, or if someone wants to go disappear and play Frisbee golf for 2 weeks, or someone wants to buy a home in Arizona and take care of their family. The why is the most important aspect, and connecting with people. And we have a responsibility to our board, to our shareholders. We have a responsibility to each other. And what I find is that when I'm able to connect with people in a very meaningful way, that it leads to even more effective performance, not just across my team, but in other business units. What I need to be careful of is not bowling people over. And it's taken me time, although I've always known this, and that I'm incredibly charismatic and I can walk into a room and carry it. What I didn't learn until the last couple of years is that energy, if I'm not aware of it, can bowl people over, and it can be intense, and you can sense it and you can feel it. And maybe you couldn't put your finger on it. It's like, oh, that makes me nervous. And so as I've gotten a greater understanding of how I can come across in a physical way as well as an energetic way, it has given me more agency and authority over the experience that people have with me. And leading for me begins to come back to radical self-inquiry and leaning into people's strengths as opposed to trying to fix something that isn't innate to them. I'm not the most detail-oriented person. I never will be, right? So there's certain aspects of my day-to-day responsibility where I need to be buttoned up, if you will, from a reporting perspective. And yet, if I were to spend more time, Omobola, focusing on the things that are not innate to me, then it would remove time and attention of the application of the aspects of myself, which are unique to me, which do make me feel energized, which do make me feel effective. And I love being with and around people. And I find that in my current role, that people outside of my day-to-day responsibility are largely drawn to that, because my sense is that they see how I operate, they see how I connect with folks, and that I care. it's different in an American company than it would be in a Japanese company, where American company, particularly if you're public, it's quarter to quarter responsibility. And so the view, and this is also, apparent or even endemic in our own government, and that if you have a 2-year window before you're up for a re-election, or a 4-year window, or a 6-year window, or you're working quarter to quarter to quarter, it doesn't encourage anyone to step back and take a look at the bigger picture. And growth is important, right? We have responsibilities, to the folks that have funded our business, but we can also make a significant impact with each other, with the communities in which we serve and live, and also with ourselves, and specifically at home. And when someone is open to discovering more about themselves and the things that make them unique, and then we begin to weave together, and it's not a formulaic experience, but if this person, we'll call Doug, is different from Elizabeth, is different from Chris, is different from Gabrielle, I don't need 20 versions of Chris McCann. What I enjoy, and the teams that I build have all sorts of backgrounds, experience levels, predilections, preferences, and that to me is inspiring, which then encourages us to connect in even greater ways. I may have answered your question.
Right. Now we're still talking about, we're still talking about leadership now, but I would like us to talk about leadership and purpose, right? So, Chris, how can leadership run with purpose to attain success? Now, suffice it to say that how can a leader engage others with passion and focus? Do you have experience, knowledge, experience you'd like to share?
Yes. There's no arriving. And this does come back to the striving aspect, and, thinking if I do this, this, and this, or if I hit these numbers, or if we have a successful exit, that everything's going to be okay. And my experience in life in general is that it's not linear. And so when we map out linear goals, we still have to account for the human experience. And purpose doesn't necessarily have to be a destination. Purpose, to me, is a derivative of our values. And only when we're clear on our values can we then begin to put together a purpose, or at least acknowledge a purpose that isn't destination based. My biggest value is that I'm pro-life. And I don't mean pro-life in the sense of where, abortion is something that I frown upon. What I mean is that life is my core value, and anything that's in support of that is my true north, and how I operate minute to minute. And it's taken me 49 years to begin to distill it down to being for life. And like many of us, I had spent 25 years professionally, if not more, and having someone else define what those goals are. And whether it was, my spouse or a girlfriend or my kids or my boss, if I didn't buy off on what those goals are and were, then I wasn't emotionally invested. You were only getting a certain percentage of me. But once I began to get really clear on what my values are, then we can begin to put together a purpose which serves ourselves and the communities in which we live. And how do you determine values? Right. And that is an interesting exercise, and it's something that I perform with folks, certainly early in our relationship, whether it's, at the company in which I work, or I'm working with other people or other organizations. And what are your core values? And do you believe them? oftentimes we go to work for a company, Omobola, where they have their mission statement or their values, and you have to wonder when you see how people operate that fall under that umbrella. It's like, well, that doesn't necessarily align with the core values that I read on your website. It doesn't necessarily align with the core values or the mission statement that's in the employee handbook. And you can begin to align yourself to that. If you work for an organization, who I'm thinking of one of our clients who is in the food industry, who is mandating that they take on a planetary objective and a planetary set of goals, and that they're providing food in a very conscious way. And I'm using my words, not theirs, and that they're good stewards of the environment. And that to me is something that's very inspiring. And that helps drive how we're selling into this organization, because this organization's core values are very well aligned, not just with my company's, but also with mine. And that is one example of where purpose in a corporate setting can certainly help win deals. Even having had conversations with these folks, I wanted to understand from a C-level, from a CEO level, why is that important to them? Where did this come from? What are they doing as an organization to align themselves, whether it's the C-suite or the folks that are coming in and cleaning up the office on a nightly basis, or the folks that are driving the trucks? Do they actually believe in this? And then we're using our product, or we're using technology as a way to fill that, but it's a tool. It's really about the people and the impact that they can make. So when we're clear on values, right, and my values may not be the same as yours, and that's what makes this experience so beautiful, only then can we begin to align that to a purpose and then put together little steps along the way that we can then follow. Did that answer your question sufficiently?
Sure. Chris, now, I'd like you to share with me any projects you have in the pipeline.
Oh, we're starting small. And it's what we're working on. When I say we, my wife and I are doing small backyard sacramental meditations and bringing together like-spirited people to uncover who they are, or what is their purpose, or what's their true nature, and sparking that level of curiosity and inner reflection. So my wife and I do those here twice a month. We also, my friends and I, in our neighborhood, have pulled together for the last 7 or 8 months a group of men, and bringing together men here in Santa Monica and Los Angeles, the greater Los Angeles area. We sit around the fireplace like we've done for tens of thousands of years, and break bread and connect. And here in the States, with radical polarization, and this has been my experience in many other countries and cultures over the last few years, is that it's not necessarily specific to the middle part of America, and that there's been so much polarization and so much fluidity at the same time. It's like, what does it mean to be a man? Right? What's the purpose? What's the privilege of that? If we self-selected to have this experience where, Omobola decided to be who and where you are, and to have the upbringing that you have, then I in turn did the same. And what's my responsibility with that? We pull together some interesting folks in the backyard, and we have conversations that are guided around: who am I? Why am I here? And what's the point of it all? And to acknowledge that in being a man and having a penis and having, a majority of testosterone versus estrogen in our system, is it okay to step into that and to elevate that experience beyond someone who is overly aggressive, or someone who feels as if they can't emote, or someone who doesn't necessarily know how to communicate, or someone who didn't have a father growing up. And it's not specific to men, but giving folks a space, I don't want to say a safe space, but giving people room to see and be seen and to share their experience. That's something that feels really good to me, and it feels good to them. And we do this on a monthly basis. I will be rolling this out in a broader way, working specifically with men that are in leadership positions that have a greater influence over their communities, the companies in which they serve, and owning that as a man, you have a responsibility to lead. You don't have to be someone that you're not. You don't have to operate in a way that's against your truer nature. And when we then explore the relationship that we have with our parents, and we begin to uncover that our fathers and our mothers were people well before they had us, right? And they had their own life experience. And we're not blaming anyone for what's been created or how we operate, but it's accepting responsibility for it. And it's really beautiful to see how this comes together. We also do integration circles, and psychedelics is one aspect of it. We don't do them in these circles, but what we've drawn together here in our community is a group of folks that are exploring their truer nature by way of meditation or psychotherapy or using, plant medicines. And it's really interesting to see that no matter which car, which vehicle people drive to get to this place, the questions are always the same. Who am I? Why am I here? And what's the point of it all? And it's far be it from me to tell you what that is, right? Because what's true for you may not be true for me. And the power of bringing people together around a fire, again, like we've done for tens of thousands of years, to be able to talk and to be able to slow down and be still and notice and pay attention to what's going on around us. In some crazy way, if it affects and helps one person, that's enough.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Chris. Wish you best of luck in the project.
Thanks.
Chris, can you share your social media handles and your website, if any?
Certainly. Yes. My website is chrismccann.co, ChrisMccann.co. You'll find on there like meditations for leaders. And you'll find on there some events that we're running locally, and also a community that we're building using Slack. Slack is the channel that most of my peers that are in business use. And it's a way to connect, share ideas with folks, and to have an open dialogue. It's, for me, community is everything. And I've had wonderful experiences with people in Oman. I've had wonderful experiences with people in New Zealand and Australia and Europe and Santiago de Chile. The human experience is the human experience. And I remember, I'll share one little story. When I was in a taxi in the Middle East, and I was heading to the airport, and my ability to speak Arabic is very, very light. My taxi driver's ability to speak English was very light. And yet we connected and laughed for about 20 minutes in talking about our sons. And it's when we make ourselves available and to feel and notice, right, and give someone space to be seen and to communicate, we're all pretty much the same. We want to ideally become better people. We want to take care of our families. We want to put a roof over our head and know that everything has a chance of being okay. And, that type of interaction with people, no matter where they sit in this world, is beautiful. And I encourage everyone to step outside of themselves a little bit and appreciate all the beauty and majesty that is here, that God's provided for us, and that we get to experience to know ourselves a little bit better. And then in turn, maybe someone else benefits.
Absolutely. Thank you for the motivation, and Chris. Thank you once again, Chris McCann, for your insight on today's show and for your time. I can only wish you the best of luck in your endeavors once again.
Same. Thank you. And thank you for your smile. I can see that every morning. In fact, I'll probably take a screenshot and just like, there's Omobola. It's great.
It's been a wonderful time once again, and Chris. Now, if you'd like to catch up with any of these episodes of Live Well Lived by Omobola Stephen, you can catch up on any cross promotion platform to bump into. And now you can have a worthwhile time listening to the show. Perhaps you'd like to be a guest on Live Well Lived by Omobola Stephen, sharing destructive mindshift conversations and insight to the audience. You can mail me at omobolastephen.o@outlook.com. Now, I'll be looking forward to your mail and connecting with you soon. Till I come your way, I need you to be good. Talk to you soon.